Dialogue and Cocktails, presented by Data.World. It's your honest, no BS, non-salesy conversation about enterprise data management with tasty beverages in hand. I'm Tim Gasper, longtime data nerd, product guy, customer guy at Data.World, joined by co-host Juan Cicada.
Hey, Tim. I'm Juan Cicada, principal scientist, head of the AI lab at Data.World. And as always, it's a pleasure. It is Wednesday, middle of the week, towards the end of the day, and really late in the day where our guest is today. I'm super excited to finally have the pleasure to have Andrew Jones, who's principal engineer and known as the inventor of data contracts. We've seen his name and the data contracts over and over all over the place. Finally had a chance to meet him in person at Big Data London, and I'm super happy you were here on the podcast. Andrew, how are you doing?
Yeah, I'm really good, thank you. Yeah, excited to be here.
Awesome. So let's kick it off. What are we drinking and what are we toasting for today?
So I have a Belgian style beer called a Saison. It's brewed about 5 miles away by a Belgian who moved to the UK, set up a brewery. What I like about it is, so it's quite a small brewery, and I brew my own beer, or I do when I have some time. And I went on with the brewery tour there, and it feels so achievable. It feels like this could be my next career. It's just what I do, but bigger. So yeah, one day when I'm tired of data and data contracts, brewing is my next career, I think.
Nice. Actually, you're not the first person. Like one of my best friends, Daniel, he moved to Uruguay. He works in he's a software engineer and stuff, and he's like, I just want to go do beer stuff, and he just was traveling around and thought that was a great country, and he literally just moved there, and he's just gonna do beer stuff. He's still working in for a while. And do that. Yeah. So a lot of people, you're not the only one thinking about that stuff. So yeah.
That's so cool.
Tim, how about you?
I am keeping it simple today. I'm actually in the Data.World office today, so I had to raid the alcohol cart that we definitely don't have in our office. But here's a little Johnny Walker Red to accompany me today.
That's we need to improve that cart because Johnny Walker Red is kind of like,
Yeah. The cart that doesn't exist, I definitely want more of a full bar so we can actually create like full cocktails and stuff like that. So
well,
something we got to do. What about you, Juan? I think you've got a special cocktail.
I got one. Finally making a real good cocktail this time. I was with some friends this weekend. My buddy who's an archaeologist, and he came up. He has this thing called the Speeding Bullet. It's 2/3 bourbon, 1/3 Aperol with some bitters. So it's like some type of an old fashioned, but no syrup in this one. This is fantastic. I can tell you. What are we cheering for? What are we toasting for, Andrew?
So I thought we would toast to everyone who helps share and promote ideas. It sounds a bit like I'm sucking up, but I'm not. But like things like podcasts, things like Medium Post, Substack, LinkedIn. Like we're quite lucky at the moment. We're so lucky at the moment. Like anyone around the world can help contribute to these ideas, comment on LinkedIn, comment on other social networks, whatever, and like help really evolve these ideas and really move quite quickly. And I think this podcast help as well. So yeah, toast to everyone who helps share ideas, to help promote ideas, to help get involved and try and move things forward.
I love that. That's an awesome thing to toast to. So thanks to everybody who's contributing.
Yeah, we have a great data community, and everybody helps each other out. So I really appreciate it.
Nice to appreciate it sometimes.
All right, so we got our funny warm-up question here, courtesy of ChatGPT, which is. So does your spouse understand what a data contract is, or do they think you're secretly a lawyer?
So no, my wife does not know what a data contract is, and she has not read my book. She offered to help proofread it, but I didn't want to put her through that. So no, I don't think she knows. I think she probably does think it's some sort of lawyer thing. Yeah. When I first started calling it data contracts internally, I was always told my manager, like, choose a better name. Like, it sounds like something you got to sign in blood. It sounds too legal. I was like, yeah, I'll come up with a better name later. Let's just go with it for now. 4 years later, we're still calling it, and now everyone's calling it. So, yeah, sorry about that. But no, my wife does not know what I do.
No, I think if you're using the word contract, people think like, okay, what are you? You work in data? You're a lawyer? Like, there's some like data lawyer things or whatever. So.
Yeah, it can be confusing. That. Yeah, we like to borrow terms in the data industry from like other things, like my wife does weaving, and I was trying to tell her about data mesh the other day, and she was like trying to apply weaving analogies and things like that, and I was like, nah, well, maybe, but anyways.
Well, I mean, it's a warehouse too, right? Like it's like I think it's all these terms have been shared. But all right, let's kick it off. There's so much to go through. All right, honest, no BS. What is a data contract?
So a data contract it's an agreement between those who generate data and those who consume data. And you have an agreement that sets expectations about, what to expect from data. So it's got a schema, it might have SLOs, it might have, or should have your owner, things like that. So, and that's all it is really. But you can then use that agreement to do quite a lot of things. You can build an interface from it. You can assign responsibilities from it, which helps you kind of shift things left as well. You can do quite a lot when you have some agreements, communication, and then an interface, and then go from there. You can apply governance to it, you can apply automation to it. There's so much you can do to it once you start just documenting it and using it in the right way.
So you start the title of this episode, and we hear a lot about shifting responsibility to the left. So what does that actually mean? And then if you shift to the left, is there there's like the ultimate you get to the beginning of things, or you can continue always shifting left? So what does that actually mean, and what is the spectrum of left?
Yeah, so shifting left was the whole point of me. Is the reason why I came with data contracts. Like, the problem I was trying to solve was a problem many of us in data have. It's like we rely on this upstream data. We're often getting it from sort of ELT processes or change data capture process like CDC. We're sucking data out of databases, and the upstream engineers, they change the databases and everything breaks downstream, and then we have to go around and fix it. I say fix it, normally work around it by putting more case statements in ETL and things like that. And I was in meetings with like people consuming data like weekly, and I kept hearing about the same old problem again and again and again. I just thought, well, there must be a better way to do this. This can't be it. This can't be right. And I was thinking, well, the only people who can control how that data changes are people who generate data. So they need to take responsibility for that. But we can't just tell them you're responsible for all this data and you can't change the database. So we need to have some way of enabling them to provide good quality data. So provide an interface, like they do with APIs. And kind of snowball from there, really. Because my background, like, the first half of my career was more in software engineering, second half more in sort of data engineering, data platforms. And as a software engineer, we never expect to be able to build a science database and expect it to go well. Because never will. We'd always have some sort of interface there. And I just felt we didn't have an interface for data. And that was maybe the root cause of the problem. Let's allow them to provide an interface. Let's let them own the interface, and let us build on top of that, and we build it with confidence. So that's really where it came from. So when I talk about shifting left, I'm talking about shifting left all the way up to those who generate data. Only they can really generate better quality data. It's fair data.
Why the term data contract? Like why does that resonate, and why is that really applicable here?
Yes, I came from APIs. Like often when you have an API, you talk about a contract between the provider and consumer. And that's where it came from. I thought, well, I want the same sort of thing for data, call it a data contract. It sounded nice having a data API. But that's kind of where the term comes from. Like it's something that you can depend upon, something you can build upon confidence, something that sets expectations again. So yeah, maybe not the best word in terms of how strong it is, but I think we're kind of stuck with it now. It seems to have resonated really well with a lot of people in data. So we're kind of stuck with it now. Yeah, for better or worse, really.
Yeah, well, it seems to have resonated a lot. I know that a lot of folks are talking about data contracts, and it's unique enough, it's memorable enough. It seems to hit kind of that important sweet spot around, I wonder what this is, and I want to understand how this can help me bring better practices to my organization. And one thing I know we want to talk about, I'll start with the positive, and maybe Juan, you want to do sort of the flip side of this, is like, what is a data contract? What is not a data contract? I'll start with the what is a data contract, which is, one of the things that Juan and I talk about is we have this framework we call the data product ABCs. And it's like accountability, boundaries, and letter C happens to be contracts. But we always say contracts and expectations. because we're like, well, sometimes it's more of a contract, sometimes it's more just an expectation. Is that a contract? I don't know. This is where words get hard, right? But I'm curious about like maybe let's start with like what is a data contract, and then I'll let Juan kind of drive the other side.
I'd love to I'd love to go through like some examples of it, like what would a simple one look like, and then how would it get more complex or more expressive or something way?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think starting off simple, I think a contract is anything that describes the data and that sets expectations around the data and that has kind of basic metadata around the data, so the owner and things like that. That's kind of a contract.
So hold on, let me just pause there for a second. So by that definition, a schema describes the data. So is a schema a contract?
Does it? No, I wouldn't say it is on its own because it doesn't set any expectations around data. It doesn't give an owner to the data. It doesn't set any responsibilities for data. It's just describing what data looks like, but it's not doing anything to prevent that from changing. It's not doing anything else. Like,
but if I look at like a SQL DDL that says it has to have these data types and have these constraints, it is telling me that what I'm expecting and the database constraints will make sure that it will have its integrity. So
yeah, but I could drop that tomorrow, right? And it's gone. I can alter columns, and although it's got constraints, I can move the constraints. Like there's nothing somebody doing that. There's nothing helping with change management there.
This is a very simple example, but there's these small nuances that you just said right there, which is really important, right? It's like, yeah, schema, but I can then change the schema tomorrow. So what, right? Or I can
that seems to be the litmus test here.
So in that essence, then a schema is part of a data contract.
Yeah, it has to be part of it. You have to know how to consume that data, how to query that data. So you need to have some sort of schema. And schema is basically it's kind of a foundational data quality check. Like at least I know what's in there and the types of them. And with a data contract, I know they're not going to change. It's not going to break and change overnight. That's part of a data contract. So schema is kind of a schema with some change management around it, some expectations around it. That's probably all you need for a data contract. What would
you argue that are like the minimal change management or expectations that should be associated to it?
Well, I shouldn't expect it to have a break and change without some kind of migration. That'd be a minimum. That migration could be, I'm changing it tomorrow, update your code tonight, or it's going to break. Or it could be something a bit nicer, probably a bit more process around it, saying, I'm going to break this schema for these reasons. There's a new schema I'm publishing alongside. You've got 3 months to move over to it. Again, like imagine you're consuming from an API. Say you're building on top of a Slack API, for example. People build businesses on top of Slack APIs. And Slack, we're not going to change the API overnight and break those businesses. That's bad for them. It's bad for their customers. They might change the API in future. It's got a version associated with it. And they'll give some sort of migration path and migration to it. Any kind of interface is the same. So if depending on Pandas or some other Python library or some other library, same sort of thing. You've got a version, a migration path when it changes, a major version, things like that. So actually probably version is something you need to have in a data contract, and a simple data contract. It's probably one I missed earlier, but probably version is a critical part.
Yeah, so that word really jumped out at me. And as you started to talk about like change and migration and some expectations around how fast things change, having a path to not have something break you, versioning very much came to mind. And so it sounds like you kind of ended that statement there with versioning ends up being a pretty important part to a data contract, because I'm assuming that there might be some best practices here, like maybe a major version increment means a breaking change or something like that.
Yeah, exactly. And this is all stuff that people in software engineering have been doing for a long time, and that we also do in data engineering for building libraries and things like that. You know, you've got semantic versioning, you've got major versions, minor versions. You've got public interfaces, you've got private interfaces you can build on, private methods. If you do that, it's not going to work very well. There's no guarantee it's going to work. Build on public interface, more guarantees, more expectations, it's going to work. It's not going to break overnight. If it does, it'll be a major version migration path. It's all the same sort of thing, really. It's all best practices. Whenever you're building on anything, you have an interface you build on. If you want to be reliable, you have an interface to build on. We haven't been doing that with data for a long time, forever maybe. We have been building on top of people's internal databases, a private interface basically, a non-consensual API. And that I feel was the root cause of most of our data quality problems. And that's kind of what I wanted to fix with data contracts.
So getting into what are, I love what we've gotten to a lot of what are they. I want to unpack this more. We can get into more details, but let's call BS on some stuff. What are you seeing out there that are being called a data contract, but you would say red flag, calling BS on that? What would that be?
So I think some places where people are using term date contracts and not going as far as I would like them to go is where we're not shifting left. It's just kind of schemas, or it's just kind of helping them define data quality checks. I mean, they're kind of good things to do, but they're not shifting things left. They're not really improving the quality of data. They're making it easier to do checks or observability, to things like that. But it's not solving, for me, that's not solving the root problem. That's not solving the problem I want to solve with data contracts. It's not doing anything to shift left, not doing anything to improve quality of data. So that's one thing I think some people are doing that I'm less keen on, and less would call it a data contract. Another thing would be where people are like, they cannot assign ownership and not kind of shifting once they left. So, those kind of things I think are not really data contract. Or where it's just kind of like a schema basically, and just a schema and just a bit of schema management. That's not a data contract. If it's just a schema, you haven't got anything else in there, you've got no versioning, nothing to change it. That's not a data contract either.
So then it seems like if we go to the spectrum of going, like you're in the right and you go to the left, there's the data teams, the data engineering teams are more on the right, and then the software teams, the ones who are actually creating the software where the data is actually the original source of where the data is coming in, right? Those are the further to the left. So does that mean that who takes responsibility for data contracts? Is it now the software engineering teams, or is it the data engineering teams, or like, because if you're really truly shifting to the left, the data teams are not really part of it. It should be the software engineering team.
Yeah, I mean that's what I feel. I think only the software engineering teams can affect the data they're producing. Like what we can do downstream, data engineering, we can work around it. We can try and infer missing data, but we can't really improve quality data. Like, say we need data to be more timely, we can't make it more timely downstream. We're bound by what's generated. Say we need a certain field to be populated and it wasn't captured upstream, we can't populate it downstream. We can infer it, but that's only going to get so far. If we want to improve data quality, it has to be done by those generated data. I don't think data consumers, people in data world, they're still part of it. They are there to provide requirements. They are there to provide incentives, like why do they need quality data, what they're going to do with it. That's going to build value for business. That's still important. That needs to be done. But if they are, look at the other way, if they are defining a contract and saying, hey, software engineers, meet my contract, what software engineer is going to be incentivized to do that? And why would they? And how would you get them to do that?
Answer your own question.
Well, you just wouldn't. Like, there's this concept in software engineering about consumer-driven contracts, where as a consumer you provide a contract and the software engineer has to meet it. It's not niche, but it's not that well adopted. It's something that you might do in the microservice architecture to help with testing and things like that. But you never start there. You always start with APIs and producers own APIs, and they provide APIs to the rest of the business. That's just the easiest thing to do. It's the simplest thing to do. And it's the same, I think it's the same for data. I can't see why it should be much different. Like, why are we not generating data with any discipline? Why are we just sucking it out from databases and thinking we can build them out reliably? And maybe the argument was like, we didn't need it reliably. We're just generating dashboards and stuff like that. And maybe that was a fair argument. I'm not sure it was, because we still spent a lot of money building those dashboards, and therefore I think we could do it cheaper if we had put a bit more effort up front. But even if we say that was a fair argument, it's not a fair argument when that data is being fed back into product teams, fed back into ML models, that then drive product features, that then drive revenue. It's no longer okay, I think, that you just do that with little discipline or no discipline at the start. You have to have it right way through, like software, or it's not going to go very well.
Yeah. Otherwise, you're just depending on the humans to hopefully do the right stuff, and your systems hopefully not to fail, right? And no, this
Yeah,
is
we all know
interesting.
systems fail, right? Systems
Mhm.
always fail. Humans do all want to do the right things. So when you speak to software engineers and explain to them problems and say, hey, I've been building off this stream from your database, and when you change the database, it breaks everything. They're like, well, yeah. But I need to change my database for reasons, for performance reasons, for new features. I need to change my database. I want to do that autonomy. You're like, okay, that's fine. Can you provide me some other interface? We're like, yeah, I can see why that's helpful. Same like APIs.
Mhm.
So it's not that hard to sell to them. And then it just becomes about incentives and prioritization and things like that, which is the same as any other prioritization argument. But I think for some reason we have always, or many organizations, we just don't feel like we can talk to the software engineering team. There's no communication between those consuming data and those generating data. There's so many layers in between, so many different teams in between. We just never challenged that assumption that we could ask for better data. And that's all I did really with data contracts. I tried to challenge that assumption, and it went pretty well, easier than I thought it would go. And then I started building around some interface around that and data contracts, and it's kind of gone from there really. And yeah, I think it's what you need to do if you want to depend on data.
Yeah. And just going back one more time to, what are not data contracts? You talked about, it needs to improve the data quality. It needs to help with the shift left to be a data contract. One topic that I think is interesting that has some intersection with data contracts, but I suspect is not data contracts itself, right? Is data testing, right? So you have, maybe you're using things like SOTA or Great Expectations. Maybe you're using other types of tool sets, right? Where you're saying like, I've got various assertions about what I expect the data, and these tests need to pass or fail. Is that a data contract? Is that part of a data contract?
I think it can be part of it. I think you can have checks in a data contract, and they can run early before it's published, so you can localize the problem. It can be alerts sent to the data generators. I think you still need checks downstream as well, because you're never going to predict all the possible ways that it might fail. Like again for software, things are always going to go wrong. You might have a field that you have data contract around, and you think it's always going to be between 0 and 1, but you never really check for it, and one day it's 100, and you're like, well, I don't know why that is, but that's going to cause things to break. So things like checks, things like observability, they're still important, but they shouldn't be the first place, the first attempt to try and catch the data quality issues. The checks they can be part of data contract. And what I've seen people do is have checks in their contract and then generate libraries or generate maybe like an OpenAPI version of a contract and use OpenAPI libraries. Generate those kind of libraries that software engineers can use to publish the data, but also runs those checks. And if those checks fail, the software engineers get alert and they can fix it before the data leaves their software, their service. So you're reducing the impact of any failure. It's not gone into all your ETL, all your dashboards. Users haven't noticed yet. It's very localized. And that, again, as any software engineer, it will tell you the cheapest place to catch issues is as early as possible. So if you didn't catch it in your CI checks, if you didn't catch it in integration tests, you might as well try and catch it in your service before it goes to all the other services. And again, like software engineers have worked this out. Why? I don't understand. I would challenge the assumption that data is in any way significantly different to how software engineers have been doing this.
Yeah, it seems like the software engineering analogy goes pretty far here, because even in software engineering, when you have certain dependability or assertions that are coming from something to the left of you, right? You're the smart engineering thing to do, right? So there's an assumption here, but the smart engineering thing to do is that you're still going to have some validation and some confirmation in your service to be sure that contract is being complying with before you go and break a bunch of stuff downstream.
Yeah, exactly. I say like you never trust your inputs, so you always have to design with like fire in mind. But like, how far you go with this depends on how important the data is, how important what you're building on the data is. Like, I'm not saying you should go this far with every data set with like build all these checks in, all data contracts in, all visibility in. Like, that's a cost to all of doing all of this, a costing time, costing money. If it's important, it's worth doing all of that. If it's driving revenue, if it's a key part of your product feature set, then it's worth doing all that. If it's less important, maybe do some of that. If it's so unimportant, you're doing none of that, it's probably not even worth generating data.
Yeah, that's interesting. So one other thing that comes to mind here, Andrew, is going back to APIs, right? APIs often have Swagger documentation and SDKs and things like that. There's sort of things that tend to wrap around APIs, right?
Mm-hmm.
Where do data contracts go? Where do they live? And is there stuff that's supposed to wrap around them?
Yes, I think data contracts should live in a similar place to like the APIs and things like that as well. So if you're asking software engineers to create data contracts, they need to be able to create them where they most expect them to be. So if they are creating their APIs in maybe their Git repo, their own Git repo alongside the service, or they create the infrastructure there, or if it comes where they're working, they should be able to create data contracts in that same area. I think ask them to go and create a data contract in a web UI somewhere else or some sort of different system. It's a harder sell. You're adding quite a lot of friction there. You're separating the code that's generating data to where the data has been defined, and one of those is going for that. I think probably almost definitely where it's been defined if it's if it's somewhere else. So I think it needs to be, if you're targeting the data generators as the people you want to own and be responsible for the data contract, they need to be able to define the contract where they are working.
But how it's an agreement, right? The data contract is an agreement. So the point I want to make here is that it's not just the software engineer who is doing it. There's other people involved. So I'm kind of, because again, the people, process, technology, right? So I guess the contract itself is going to be some sort of code that lives inside of GitHub, right? I'm trying to get very specific here. But there's other people who need to go look at it and like, yeah, that's exactly what you understood that correctly. Good, right? Let's go do these checks. Like, are we expecting now the people who are not, who don't use GitHub to get into GitHub? Like, how would all that agreement actually occur? And where would that happen?
Yes, I think for the most part, the agreement happens before it's been defined in code and before it's defined in GitHub. So, you say you're creating a new service, and that's going to generate some data, and you know that it's going to be important for some reporting reasons. So maybe you talk to your BI team and say, hey, you need to do some reporting around this. We're generating data. What kind of things do you need to generate reporting that you've been asked to create? Have a conversation around that. Maybe some sort of requirements document, however you want to do that. And then the code bit is kind of the last bit. It's kind of like, we've agreed on this and now we're implementing it. And then we can evolve it over time. If we get things wrong or if we miss something, we can evolve over time. It's not set in stone. I just say evolution is managed. So I think a lot of that happens before it's in code. But once it's in code, you're right, people need to be able to find it, discover it. So I think it doesn't just live in, say, GitHub, but that's kind of the source of truth. That's where it's defined. But from there, you can very easily move it to other places. So what I've done in the past is convert my data contract into an OpenAPI version of a data contract and then use that to publish to a data catalog. We use something called Backstage from Spotify. It's a catalog that's got APIs in it, it's got our services in it, and now it's got our data in it as well. So it's all kind of one place. But you can convert it to any kind of format. You can convert it to any kind of format you like. So we convert it also to Protobuf, for example, and configure pub subtopics and things like that. You can do the same for Kafka. So you can always convert your data contract into any format and ingest it into a data catalog, into LookML, into whatever you like, really. Because it's machine readable as well as human readable. So, and it's not that hard to do that. It's an afternoon to convert it into an OpenAPI spec, or a couple of days to try and convert it to LookML, which are things we've done. So yeah, it's a great way to kind of provide that metadata to other services.
That makes sense. So it sounds like in general, there's sort of the source of truth around the data contract itself, which is going to be, ideally code, because it's embedded in with what you've developed for your data pipeline or for your data services or whatever that is, right?
Mm-hmm.
But then if you're trying to create discoverability around it, then someplace like a catalog or whatever other means that you're using to create discoverability around data and analytic artifacts and things like that can make a lot of sense.
Yeah, exactly. You don't want to end up in a place where data is siloed. Like you might, maybe you do, particularly if you're thinking about data mesh in the future. You probably do want to start moving towards a more decentralized model for this data, where it's owned by different people, and that's fine. But then you need to make sure, it's not siloed. It might be decentralized, it might be isolated, but it's not siloed. You can still discover it. You still know how to query it. You can still join it. And that's an area where we're very lucky again, because we've got great data warehouses where you can isolate things by. So I'm more familiar with BigQuery, so isolate things in data sets and GCP projects and things like that. But you can still query across them with no cost at all. So you can isolate for ownership, isolate for responsibility, but without siloing data, without any cost of moving that data again to make it available to other people. You can do the same in streaming things like Kafka and PubSub and things like that. So we're very lucky to have this tooling that allows us to do that, and we can use data contracts to kind of implement those for ownership and implement discoverability by interfacing with other systems, implementing governance and data governance. All that sort of stuff can be implemented up data contract. Once you have some metadata that describes data, that's really becomes quite easy really to build on top of that and do quite interesting things with that data.
Interesting. And all of this discussion kind of around code and things like that makes me think that although there's some best practices here, there's a lot of decisions to be made, and I'm sure that there's a lot of companies that have implemented some data contract approaches that have had to kind of invent this for themselves. And I know some of the stuff that you've been working on is to help people kind of navigate some of this. But then there's also like vendors now that are starting to say like, oh, we're a data contracts platform or a toolkit or something like that. Can you tell us a little bit about like what is the vendor landscape around data contracts? Like why might you want to use a tool, and is that useful? Like, is this kind of like, or is this a little more experimental? Like, let's see where this goes, right?
Yeah, I think we're still kind of early really in kind of like data contracts journey, and we're kind of thinking like not everyone needs to be building their own infrastructure for data contracts. I think it's good that people are looking at how they can solve this problem more generally for other people. So I'm excited to see what they're building and how they how successful they are. I also think it's interesting how there are some people who are thinking about creating sort of data contract standard, and some vendors involved in that about how they can use data contracts to help. It's like interchange format for data, so you can, like I was giving an example earlier, where we could grow a data contract into something that then a catalog could ingest and make it available, or an observability tool could ingest and start doing NLP checks on it, or things like that. So that's quite interesting. I think though with some of the new vendors who are building data contract tooling, the question I'd ask is like, who are they expecting to use this tooling? Like, is it the data generators again? Is it people? Are we shifting left to the software engineers, or is it aimed at the data engineers and data people? And if it's aimed at the data people, how successful would it be actually changing the organization, not changing the culture of the organization to one where you have shifted that responsibility left, and you are applying discipline to data that's been generated. So we just see how that evolves, really.
So okay. I mean, let's get very honest, no BS around some of these things, right? So, like, we talk about the solutions around here, and how complicated or easy or not complicated should these solutions be, right? We were talking about this before. Is like, first of all, like the contract itself, needs to be defined and live somewhere. Like it's a piece of code, whatever, right? And we can talk like, is there a standard for that, right? Is it all the way from a syntax or whatever, right? Is this in YAML, JSON, whatever? Okay, it exists and it's living in GitHub or whatever. Okay, now I need to use that contract and execute it somewhere, right? And I think you described this before, having an interface to drive that data through it, right? And that interface, what you're arguing is it should be shift left, and it should be, if it's truly a data contract, it should be something that the software engineering should be do. And then this should be like it could be in a Kafka topic, pub subs, right? I mean, if you do it as a table in a data warehouse, then you're not shifting left enough. So how complicated is this? Like you're saying that we should go generalize these infrastructures, but are we just generalizing something that's kind of pretty simple that really there's not much generalization to do? Or is that if we do that generalization, that's something that should be more on the software engineering stack versus more we're seeing vendors and tools putting things in the data stack? But I'm like, if you're doing the data stack, your point is like that's not left enough, so it's not really a data contract. So it's like, anyways, I'll stop ranting.
So maybe I'm making it sound more complicated than it should be, because I think it's quite simple to build this tooling. So first time we did this, we did Spike in like sort of MVP in a couple of weeks. In my book, there's one chapter on implementing a simple data contract, building a BigQuery table, and putting it in Schemagy, I think, as well. And it's 15 pages, just one chapter on that. Using open source and tooling to build on top of. So it's not that complicated. The way I like to build it, and in those examples, I built it on top of these sort of infrastructure as code platforms. So there's one called Plumio, using my book, it's open source one. At the company I work at, we had an in-house one, so we built on top of that. So you shouldn't build it all from scratch. But it's not that hard. A YAML file, so a bit of Python code, that then builds interfaces, and then you've got a contract really, and you can write to that. And then you can take it as far as you like. You can build software libraries, make it easy to publish. You can integrate data catalog. There's all things you do data governance and anonymization and privacy and stuff like that. There's all things you can do on top of that. But the simplest thing, like I said, it's one chapter in my book, 15 pages, and it walks you through data contract, a fully minimal viable data contract platform.
All right, I'm always looking for Tim. We're always looking for quotes and for a teacher quote. I think it's like data contract. I don't know, this is probably a long quote, but something like data contract implementation. It's a 15-page chapter in my book.
Yeah, I'll get that printed.
Would you get that T-shirt? If I printed it, would you want that T-shirt?
For sure, definitely.
Yeah, well, I mean, again, honest, no BS. I mean, this is the type of stuff that we gotta go talk about. Like, you gotta be honest, no BS about these things. And
it's easy to overcomplicate stuff, right? Yeah,
I think the tooling is easy. The tech's all there. We got great tech in Monday, so we've got great tech. The harder part is how you incentivize software engineers, how you get things prioritized, how you actually do shifting left, how you assign responsibility. That's all the harder part, and that's where I spent most of my time over the last few years, talking to all those different people, explaining to them problems we're having, why we need data to be better, because we're using it to build things that drive revenue, that are aligned with our company goals, all that sort of thing. And it's not hard, particularly. It takes effort. It's something that a lot of data people, I think, we don't do very often. But we can do it, and once you get that buy-in, you can get it prioritized. You can get the software engineers doing the work.
So let me get into one you just said. If we get buy-in, so let's talk about the buy-in, the people, the incentives. All right, go.
Yeah. So all of this is kind of assuming that data is important to your organization, or that you want to use data for something important. And that's probably what many organizations are. There's probably something in your goals, in your vision, in your organization goals, that business goals, that says we'll deploy an ML model that does this and drives this product feature, or we'll use data to to drive some product feature. Or maybe your software engineering teams are using data as well, and it's moving data between themselves, maybe to improve how they bill customers or integrate with Salesforce better so they can do growth better. Most thing, or I say most, maybe everything, like data's being moved around all the time to try and meet business goals, right? If business goals are important enough, then it shouldn't be that hard to get some effort prioritized upstream in software engineering team who generate data to say, can you generate a bit better quality data because that'll save us loads of time downstream, or can you generate a bit better quality data, a bit more reliable data, so we can depend on it, so we can build this important feature that cannot go down every week like our BI dashboard does at the moment. So yeah, and if you're an organization that doesn't value data, probably trying to deploy data contracts isn't going to be successful. Probably you're not. You probably don't want to invest too much. You're probably not investing too much in data in general. And if you're listening to this podcast, you're probably thinking it might be the best job for you. But many organizations are not like that. They are investing a lot in data. We spend a lot of money on data. We spend a lot of money on data warehouses. We spend a lot of money on data tooling. We spend a lot of money on data teams and BI people and data engineers, analytics engineers, and all different layers we've got. So doing that a bit better, a bit cheaper, should get prioritized.
Now it goes back to this is show me the money, right? Let's go figure out. I'm going to go invest in this if you tell me that if the investment of this is going to give me a larger return than that investment. So
exactly,
it kind of sounds obvious, but it's just very typical that people forget about it, and they just get so excited about the tech. Right? So
yeah, I do too. I'm a techie. I'm an engineer. I could talk a lot about tech, but really, I spent most of my time not doing tech. It's mostly around, I guess it happens to everyone. I think when you get more senior, you tend to move away from the tech and the code and making the code look great and efficient, and you start moving up and up and up, and then you realize it's all about what value are we delivering as a team, how do we show that, how do we use that to get more investment, to prioritize our things. So that's the journey I've been on over the last few years through data contracts, really. And yeah, something that everyone has to kind of get to at some point if you want to change your organization to try and do things better.
Tim, any final words you want to?
I think maybe just one last question here, which is, who do you think in the organization, just think about any sort of an enterprise here, their data team, their engineering team, right? Who in the organization is going to be the best advocate for data contracts? Is it going to be on the engineering side? Is it going to be on the analytics side? Is it a governance person? Who's in the best position to be evangelizing and pushing for this?
Well, that's a good question. What I think I did really well at the start was I had this idea about data contracts, and I did show it to data people, and obviously they loved it. Like, yeah, we want better data. Sounds great. Go with that. But also before any code was written, way before that, I spoke to a lot of our engineering teams, and again got my buy-in and got them involved in the solution design and made them feel become owners of this program of change I wanted to try and achieve. So really got them on board, and I think they end up becoming the best advocates because they understand the problems, and they are software engineers talking to other software engineers, not a data team talking to the product team saying, hey, we want it better, but they're actually within there. And they understand the problems, and they understand why it's important, and they are there when data people are not in the room evangelizing for this thing. But even better, they might be depending on data themselves. They might feel the same sort of pain because actually software engineering teams also depend on data from other software engineering teams, and sometimes that isn't of great quality, and that causes problems. So I think, yeah, they are good evangelizers. At some point, you probably need to get leadership brought in as well. If you're going to try and do a big program of change where you maybe are starting to think about changing existing data, which obviously there's an investment in that, or if you're trying to think about changing your org and maybe moving people around and then you start going towards data mesh and things like that, that's probably further down the line. But yeah, at the start, just getting software engineers involved. If everyone's you want to do the work to find data contracts, they need to be brought into it.
So you're saying the champions who should be evangelizing data's contracts should be the software engineering team.
The ideal ones would be.
Ideal.
I mean, we're talking about the ideal ones here. And actually, you said another really great point here is that the software teams also consume data from some other software teams. So it's like it's just within the software world right there. That's ideally.
And we've seen that some of the great success we've had is like we've had things organically move to that contract. It wasn't on that contract before. Moved to it because another software engineering team needed that data from a data, and they wanted it to be reliable because they were going to do something else with it. And it wasn't data science. It wasn't fancy AI and ML. It wasn't dashboards. It was just like we're moving data between these services, and we need to move it in batch. And we're using data platform tooling to do that because it's most suitable for this particular use case. And actually, we want it schemaed and we want SLOs around it because what we're building on is important. So they use their contracts.
This was I actually was not expecting this answer. I was expecting somebody like on the data side or whatever. And I have to say, this is a refreshing answer because I think I sometimes feel that the whole point that I'm realizing that my main takeaway from our discussion today is that data contracts is really more about the software teams and not just the data teams, which I would actually say that we need to kind of change the name, call it the software data contract or something like that, software data agreement or something. I think it would be a more appropriate title or label description here because it's really, that's what a truly shift left one. Because I think what I'm seeing kind of just talking to people and all the blah, blah, blah you hear and they take data contracts, everybody I talk to who are talking about data contracts, none of them are software engineer folks, and they're not even talking to software engineering folks, right? And then just because it has the word data contract, then it ends up being more of on the consumer side, right? It's really the things that you have argued that are not really data contracts.
There's a lot of people talking about data contracts who are like the BI dashboards want the data warehouse to provide some more reliability or something like that, right?
Yeah, and to be fair, that's okay. Like data people produce data too, and they should have a contract around that. So that's not, it's not bad. It's good, but it's only you're still quite far downstream. Yeah, you're still you can't make data better at that late stage. You can only make it not worse.
Not making any enemies here.
No, I don't want to make enemies. Yeah, so I guess like these are my opinions, and people have different opinions, and if people are doing things, if people think the best thing they can do is not have their data, but a level or two behind that, and they think that's as far as we can get, and they want to improve that, that's good. That's still better than we've got now. I'm either ambitious or optimistic, probably optimistic, but I think we can go further, and I have done that. And I don't see what would prevent other people from doing that.
I applaud you, Andrew, for really pushing the barrier and showing the community that we can do more and we should strive for excellence. So
yeah, I think only because like what we're doing now is so important. Like it's driving revenue. It's
drive revenue. Yes. Show me the money, as I always say.
Exactly. And if it's not that important, then don't go that far. Maybe go to those levels that a lot of people are thinking of going to at least make things better for yourself. But I think most organizations are going that far. They are trying to drive revenue from their data. So then it's worth doing it better.
Yeah. Tim and I are back channeling here. Tim, just close us out with your comment there.
Yeah, my back channel comment to Juan here was common sense, yet a lot of people don't listen to it.
All right, Andrew, I told you we could keep. I got a bunch of stuff I want to keep chatting about. Looking forward to our next conversation in London, hopefully, and having some beers. Hopefully, your homebrewed beers. Love to do that. But all right, next, our AI minute. You got 1 minute to rant whatever you want about AI. Go.
So I thought I'd do something slightly different, and it's not so much a rant, but it's more like again a bit like what I did earlier, more appreciation. Like, so I remember the internet coming along and playing Counter-Strike and dial-up and things like that, but I didn't really appreciate it. I was too young. I remember the App Store coming along and the iPhones, and I wasn't really in position to take advantage. But seeing all the things we're doing with AI and the amount of change that could happen from it, good or bad, and being in a position where I understand what's going on, I'm relatively close to it. I'm not a data scientist, but I understand roughly what's going on. It's a pretty unique opportunity, really, just to be part of that. So I think maybe, stepping back and just realizing that, like, we're lucky to be part of this big change, no matter how it turns out. It's a nice thought.
1,000% with you. This is what I tell everybody. Like, we are in 1992 when the web came out.
Yeah, exactly.
ChatGPT is like AOL, right? It's like there's so much more to come here.
This is what I have my iPhone here with me. This is version 15, right? This has evolved a lot. Like, this stuff is going to evolve.
Yeah, and we don't really think the iPhone, we take it for granted now, but what would be 15 years from now, what will ML be doing for us? And AI will be doing, it's amazing to be part of it in a small way.
All right, we got our lightning round questions. I'm going to kick it off. Number one, is the discipline of thinking about data contracts and expectations more important than the data contracts themselves?
Yes.
All right.
Second question. Are data contracts a mandatory or a required part of data mesh?
Yes, they are.
Right. Are data contracts more valuable for tech companies where a lot of the upstream data is software engineering generated?
Yes, probably. It's quite hard actually to do contracts when you don't control the generation of data. And that's something I haven't worked out yet because you can't shift it back far left. So yes.
Okay, so here's the interesting point. So if the data contracts do live in the true data engineering world, if you have no control of, I mean, you shift off as left as possible. It's like, well, I just got my data from Salesforce. I can't change that. So
yeah, you're not gonna make Salesforce give you better quality data. You're small, obviously you're not got that influence over them. But what you can do is you might have Salesforce admin and they might be creating custom objects and they can own the data contract. That's as left as you can go. At least they can start setting expectations around the data. But you obviously can't put code in Salesforce, so you have to think about a different solution. That's something I haven't yet really worked out a solution for. But that's probably where, like, a lot of the stuff people are building is probably good for those kind of things.
That's great. Go as far left as you can go. All right, final question here. Think about like the maturity of a company and their data stack and their data strategy. Are data contracts something that organizations should leverage from the start, or is it really more of an advanced thing?
Yeah, I was quite a lot actually, because I was kind of like 3 years into building a data platform at a company, and then I said I can now want to do data contracts and try to change direction a bit. And if I go back in time, I would have done it from day one. I think it's a lot easier to do it at the start. Migrating data to data contracts is a huge effort. Yeah, it's very difficult. But not just that, just the way you build data platforms, they are much more effective when you're building on data contracts, using a data contract backed data platform, is what I call it. And you can do a lot of things that are much easier, like governance, like even like simple tasks like backup and things like that. You can build all those types of things on data contracts as well. We didn't get time to talk about those things, but you can build a whole data platform around the idea of data contracts. And also from the start, get people, set your culture as one that, your data culture as one that says the data is owned by the data generators. And the culture is probably the hardest thing to change when you're 3, 6, 10 years into a 10 years old company. It's a lot harder to change your culture in any way. So yeah, do it as early as possible, I'd say. As soon as your data becomes important, as soon as you start using data for something fairly important, you probably want to start putting data contract around it.
That's a great recommendation and takeaway here, because I think that, for a lot of folks, they may already be on their journey now. And so now it is much more of a change management and a technology change issue. But for those lucky few listeners out there that are getting to start new or building a separate stack or something like that, think about how you can leverage data contracts or the discipline of it sooner. You're going to be happier from a governance standpoint, from a usability standpoint, and much, much more. Oh my goodness!
All right, Tim.
Episode. We've got some takeaways, huh?
All right, Tim, take us away with your takeaways.
All right. So we started with Honest No BS, what is a data contract? And you said that it's an agreement between those who produce data and those who consume it. It could be SLOs, SLAs, owners, etc. The key is the management of the responsibilities around it, which allows you to have dependability and understanding, and shifting responsibility to the left. So kind of thinking of a river of data, a river of information, right? It's coming from the left, it's flowing to the right, right? You want to shift to the left. And what does it mean to shift responsibility to the left? Well, this is the whole reason for data contracts. You said the problem of we're bringing in all this data from all these different systems, something breaks, we have to fix it, right? We need to have some way to have reliability, predictability, guarantees around these things, or else we get to be that, that age-old problem of data quality, which is the data engineer getting woke up at 3 o'clock in the morning on a Sunday morning because they have to go fix the data pipeline, right? Like, no, we don't want to live in that world. We don't want to live in the world where that dashboard goes to the board and it's the wrong answer, right? So I think what's interesting here is the software engineering practices that you recommend. Really, a lot of this inspiration comes from software engineering, where you have these guarantees around the information that's being passed through the API, around the information that's coming through the database. Usually you don't build your services directly talking to the database. You have a service that sits in front of it that interacts with it, and it provides these kinds of guarantees around user experience, around ownership, around responsibility. We need to bring that to the world of data, and that's what those data contracts are trying to do. And what are data contracts? Well, it's anything that describes the data and sets expectations around the data. And I think we had some interesting explorations around like what is and isn't a data contract, because like schema, for example, might have some assertions about like this is a string and certain ways that you can access that data. But if there's never any expectations set, then you're not really creating a data contract around it. It's like part of a data contract, but you haven't gone the full way. So I thought that was super interesting. Juan, I'll pass it to you. What about your takeaways?
Yeah, well, then what are not data contracts? Or maybe it's being called of it, but it really isn't. So for your position is that it's just not going far enough, right? Where it doesn't really result in a truly shifting left. And you're not really effectively improving the data quality. So for example, data testing can be parts of data contracts because you want to have checks to ensure that they're compliant with the data contracts, but just alone a data test isn't. Right? You should be catching them in integration checks and CI/CD checks. And then you should be adding them there in case those didn't catch it. And you can provide notifications. They can be localized. But at the end, the data testing by itself is not a data contract. It's part of it. And really thinking about the shifting left, it's really pushing it down to the software engineering team, right? For example, if you want more data to come in more timely, the data teams can't do that on their own. They really have to go push that to the software teams to go do that. The data teams will provide the requirements, and we need to work out the incentives there. I think one of the big issues here is the lack of communication between the different teams and so many layers in between that. Another aspect is, where do these contracts live, right? So if the software engineering teams are actually creating them, creating these data contracts, it should exist in a place where they work in, right? So it's like GitHub, and because if you ask them to do it somewhere else, they're not going to get that there. We also talked during during the lightning round questions that if you're not building yourself the software doing that, then you can push it as left as you can, which is like wherever that data is landing from your different sources. And then if you want these contracts to be discoverable, then this is where the data catalogs will come in, because you can be able to define these data contracts and be able to go push them to data catalogs so they can be discoverable and other people can go use them or understand what's out there. Talking about vendors, yeah, it's very early still, but I mean, why create something brand new and bespoke? We have to leverage these tools, but just remind ourselves that this doesn't have to be too complicated. Go read the chapter in Andrew's book. It's just 15 pages long that describes an implementation of this. Incentives. How do we get people to adopt the data contracts? Bottom line, just show me the money, right? Every organization has some kind of goal, right? They're trying to accomplish X, they're building Y, they're improving metric Z. If the business goal is important enough, then it shouldn't be hard to get folks upstream, typically in this case, the software teams, to agree to provide that higher quality data because it's more dependable data to serve that goal. And at the end, like who should be the champions, the evangelizers of these data contracts? ideally the software teams, right? Because because they're the ones who are actually going to be implementing this stuff. And now, of course, from there you go to leadership. But poof, how do we do?
That was great. Yeah, perfect.
Anything we missed?
No, I mean, there's always things to expand on, but we could talk about this for hours and hours.
All right, well, to wrap up, let's throw it back to you. 3 final questions. What's your advice? Who should we invite next? And what resources do you follow?
Yeah, I think my advice is kind of related to what you speak about, but just always try to remember why you're trying to do something. So we talk about data contracts. So yeah, why are you trying to deploy them? What is your aim? What do you want to achieve? What is helping your organization achieve? Who else is needed to achieve it? What else needs to achieve it? And then, like, if you need other people, in my case, in our case, like data software engineers, just go and speak to them and help get them on board and explain to them why it's important. I think I'm an optimist, but I think like most people want the best outcome. And if you get the right people in the room to talk about the problems, you'll get the best outcome. And those right people are data people, software people, PMs, data governance people, those kind of people, get them in the room and you'll get a good outcome.
So much, this is like kind of common sense, but again, what Tim was saying, we sometimes forget about it. So I appreciate you bringing these things up.
Well, and I think
simple, really, right?
yeah, keep it simple. And I think with data contracts, sometimes people think that like, oh, like the point of a data contract is so you don't have to talk to people or something like that, right? It's like, no, it's so you do talk to people, and then so you bring each other together.
Yeah, you have to. It always comes down to people more than technology, always.
People. Who should we invite next?
So I think someone I've been on a couple panels with recently who talks really well about data contracts, data products, data mesh. Someone called Amy Vergada, who works for the Swiss Marketplace Group. She lives in Germany, but she talks a lot, really well about these kind of things. Different opinions sometimes to me, which is obviously good. Yeah, I like where she talks about data products in particular, as well as data contracts, data mesh.
Cool. And then what resources do you follow? I mean, one, you have a book, right?
Check out the book.
We're the non-salesy podcast, but all about education and it's a book. So yeah, get your book for sure.
Yeah, I do a bit of everything really. I do buy a lot of books. I read some of them. I subscribe to a lot of newsletters, like email newsletters. Don't read them all the time, but browse them. I like to browse them. What I really like though is kind of the in-person stuff. Now it's kind of back again. So I'm lucky. I live close to London, so there's lots of meetups. They're really good. What I particularly like about them is you get people at all different stages of their career able to talk and able to have conversations with. So yeah, I like those in particular, local meetups, smaller meetups, as well as a big conference as well. So yeah, a bit of everything really, and podcasts as well, obviously. Less so because I don't commute as much as I used to, but they're still great for and more entertaining kind of version of events.
Podcasts are always fun. And where can people find your book? Is it like on Amazon or?
Yeah, it's everywhere you can get books. So Amazon, via Riley subscription service if you get that. If you go to data-contracts.com, you'll find the links to everywhere you can get it. So yeah, if you want to know more or you want to implement it in a chapter, yeah, I love it. You should check it out and do let me know what you think if you do happen to check it out.
Data-contracts.com.
All right. Andrew, this has been a pleasure. Thank you so much for being on the podcast. We truly, truly appreciate it. We got some really honest, no BS takes on this. We got an Andrew t-shirt coming up soon. We're going to do this, right, Tim, one day?
We've got 156 or so t-shirts we got to design here.
All right. Andrew, cheers. Thank you so much for everything.
Cheers. Thanks for having me. It's been great fun.